Evan had lived alone on his small ranch for so many years that he sometimes forgot what it felt like to have another voice around. The ranch had once belonged to his parents, who worked hard all their lives to build it. But after they passed away, Evan inherited not only the land, but also all the problems that came with it. The fences were old, the barn roof leaked when it rained, and the soil no longer produced crops the way it used to. Every morning, he woke up long before sunrise, tired but determined, forcing himself to keep the ranch alive even when the odds stood against him. He was a young man, but the hard years had carved lines of exhaustion around his eyes. His hands were rough from fixing tools, lifting hay, and repairing fences. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw a cowboy who tried his best every single day but still returned home feeling defeated. He never complained, though. He had been raised to believe that a man should carry his burdens quietly. But sometimes, when the sun set and the ranch fell silent, he wished he had someone to talk to, someone who could share even a few words of comfort or understanding. One late afternoon, after selling a few eggs and some scraps of leather in town, Evan rode home feeling heavier than usual. The sky was turning orange, and soft wind brushed against his face. He kept thinking about how little money he had earned that day, and how much more he still needed to fix the ranch. The thought exhausted him. As he followed the dirt road leading back to his property, he saw something unusual ahead. A large wagon sat stuck deep in the mud at the side of the road. The wheels refused to move, and a tall woman stood beside it, trying with all her strength to push it free. She was taller than any woman Evan had ever seen, strong, broad-shouldered, and steady like someone who had lived her whole life working with her hands. Her long brown hair was tied back, and her clothes were covered in dust, showing she had been struggling for a while. Evan slowed his horse and approached carefully. "Ma'am, do you need help?" he asked politely. The woman turned, surprised but not frightened. Her eyes were calm and steady, the kind of eyes that understood hardship. "I won't say no to help," she replied, her voice deep but gentle. "This wagon has been stuck here for too long." Evan jumped off his horse and joined her. Together, they tried pushing the wagon, but the mud was thick and stubborn. He grabbed a nearby wooden plank and used it under the wheel to create leverage. Eventually, with a strong combined effort, the wagon rolled free. The woman sighed with relief and brushed the dirt from her hands. "You're stronger than you look," she said with a small smile. Evan felt his face warm with embarrassment. Compliments were rare in his life. "I just know some tricks," he replied. "I can see that." She stepped closer, studying him the way a seasoned rancher studies a new horse carefully and with curiosity. "My name is Mara." "Oh, my name is Mara." "Evan," he said. Mara nodded as if she had expected him to say something like that, a name simple and honest, matching the kind of man he appeared to be. Now that he stood near her, he could see her more clearly. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her tall frame making her look like a guardian of the land. She wore no jewelry, no fancy ribbons, only a worn leather belt and boots, patched more than once. She seemed like someone who knew the land well and did not fear hard work. "Do you live around here?" Evan asked. "Up in the mountain settlements," she replied. "It's a long way from here. My daughter and I came down to buy supplies." Evan nodded, noticing a small shape peeking from the wagon window. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, watched him with wide eyes. She looked shy and nervous, hiding behind the curtain every time he glanced her way. Mara followed his gaze and spoke softly. "That's my daughter, Lena. She's been quiet since her father passed 2 years ago." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable but heavy, with unspoken stories. Evan did not know what to say, so he simply nodded with respect. Mara leaned against the wagon. "Thank you for helping us, Evan. Most people rode past without a word. I couldn't leave you here alone," he said simply. Her eyes softened. "If you ever need help, come to my place. People in the mountains look out for each other. Evan didn't expect such a direct offer. "Thank you," he said, though he didn't know if he would ever go. He wasn't used to asking for help. Before she climbed into the wagon, Mara paused and looked him over again, not with judgment, but with something almost thoughtful, as if she noticed more about him than he realized. "You look tired," she said gently. "Life has not been easy for you lately." Evan didn't answer. He was not used to people seeing through him so clearly. Mara seemed to understand his silence. "Take care of yourself, Evan." She climbed into the wagon, and with her strength and skill, she guided the horses forward. Evan watched them leave, until they disappeared down the road. Even after they were gone, the air felt different around him, as if her presence had left an imprint. When he reached town the next day to buy nails and rope, he mentioned meeting Mara. The townspeople responded, with raised eyebrows and quiet respect. They said Mara was well known in the mountain area, a widow who managed her land alone, strong enough to chop wood faster than some men. But they also mentioned her daughter, Lena, who had spoken less and less after her father's death. "Some," said the girl, barely smiled anymore. Evan listened quietly. He didn't understand why he felt drawn to their story, but something inside him stirred. Mara's calm strength stayed in his mind, and the shy little face of Lena peeked into his thoughts more than once. He did not want to admit it, but a part of him felt a strange warmth, knowing Mara had noticed him, had invited him, had spoken to him in a way no one else did. Back on his ranch that evening, he sat on his porch, staring at the fading sunlight across the empty land. The fences stood crooked, and the barn leaned slightly, like an old man trying to stay upright. Everything looked worn out, but tonight he didn't feel the usual hopeless heaviness. Instead, he thought of Mara's steady eyes and the way she said his name. He wondered why she looked at him like she already understood him, even though they had met only once. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know why he felt so affected by a simple meeting on the road. But deep inside, he sensed that his life, which had stayed quiet and lonely for so long, was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. And somewhere far away in the mountain settlements, Mara sat beside a small fire with her daughter. Lena asked a quiet question she had not asked about anyone in a long time. "Mama, will the cowboy visit us again?" Mara looked into the flames, thinking about Evan's honest face and gentle voice. She didn't answer right away. She simply placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder and said softly, "Maybe, dear, maybe he will." Neither Evan nor Mara knew it yet, but that single meeting on the muddy road was the beginning of something that would change all three of their lives forever. Evan did not plan to visit Mara so soon. In fact, after returning to his ranch, he told himself he should forget about the tall widow and her quiet daughter. He had too much work to worry about. The fence was breaking in 3 different places, the water trough needed repairs, and one of his horses had fallen ill. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on the ranch, his mind kept wandering back to the road, where he had first seen Mara pushing her wagon alone. Her calm voice, her strong hands, and her steady gaze kept returning to him again and again. 2 days passed before he finally told himself he had a reason to see her. Mara had lent him a heavy metal tool, a hook he had used to free the wagon from the mud. He knew she might not need it urgently, but he felt it was right to return it. More honestly, he wanted to see her again, even if he did not admit it aloud. Early in the morning, he saddled his horse and began the long ride into the mountain settlements. The path grew narrow and rocky as he went higher. Tall trees surrounded him, and the sound of birds filled the air. It felt peaceful, different from the dry, open fields near his ranch. When he finally reached Mara's home, he stopped and stared for a long moment. Her home stood strong on a wide patch of land. The house was built of thick wooden logs, and the roof looked new. To one side, there was a neat yard with chickens running freely. On the other side stood a barn that looked sturdy enough to survive a storm. Everything about her place showed hard work, order, and care. Evan felt a little embarrassed seeing it. Compared to Mara's home, his ranch looked old and forgotten. He climbed off his horse and took a deep breath. As he approached the house, he saw the door open and Mara step outside. She wore a simple dress and had her hair tied back as usual. When she saw him, her eyes widened slightly, not with surprise, but with a warm kind of welcome, as if she had been expecting him. "You came," she said simply. "I thought I should return your tool," Evan replied, lifting the hook from his saddle. Mara stepped closer and took it from him. "Thank you, but you didn't have to ride all the way here just for that." Evan felt his ears warm. "I wanted to return it properly." Before Mara could say anything more, a small face peeked from behind her leg. It was Lena. She stared at Evan with her big eyes, hiding halfway behind her mother, but not running away. This time, she did not look afraid, just curious. Evan offered her a gentle smile. The girl's fingers tightened around her mother's dress, but she gave a shy nod. Mara placed a comforting hand on her daughter's head. "She remembers you," Mara said softly. "After we reached home, she mentioned the cowboy who helped us." Evan felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. "I'm glad she wasn't scared of me." "She isn't," Mara replied. "You were kind to us. That's rare these days." Before Evan could respond, Mara stepped aside and said. Evan hesitated. He had not expected an invitation. But when Lena glanced up at him again with soft eyes, he felt something gentle pull him forward. He followed Mara inside. The house was warm, clean, and comfortable. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of dried herbs and handmade tools. A soft smell of cooked bread filled the air. Lena sat quietly on a small stool near the fire, peeking at Evan every few minutes. Mara prepared tea while telling him about her land, the challenges of the mountains, and how she managed everything alone. "You do all this by yourself?" Evan asked, impressed. Mara nodded. "Someone has to. Life doesn't stop just because it becomes harder." Her words carried the weight of someone who had endured loss but refused to give up. Evan felt respect growing inside him. Mara was not just strong in body, she was strong in heart. After they finished tea, Mara invited him to walk around the land. Together, they walked past the barn, the vegetable garden, and the small stream that ran behind the house. Evan noticed that Lena followed them quietly, always staying a few steps behind, but close enough to listen. Evan bent down to check the wooden fence and commented on a loose nail. Mara watched him carefully as he fixed it without being asked. "You know your way around ranch work," she said. Evan nodded. "I've been doing it my whole life." "You're good at it," she said with certainty. No one had said that to him in years. He felt his chest tighten with a strange mixture of pride and sadness. For a moment, they stood quietly, watching a breeze move through the trees. Mara suddenly looked at him with a seriousness that made him straighten. "I want to tell you something," she said. Evan's heart thumped, not out of fear, but anticipation. Mara took a deep breath. "You are a good man, Evan. And I am a widow who has responsibilities too big for me alone. My daughter needs a father figure. Someone gentle, but firm. Someone who will guide her with kindness." End quote. Evan blinked, surprised by her directness. Before he could say anything, she continued, "And you need a family. You need someone at your side, not out of pity, but because you deserve better than living alone with burdens that should be shared." Evan felt speechless. His face warmed, his throat tightened, and he struggled to understand why she was speaking like this. No one had ever spoken to him with such honesty and clarity. Then Mara said the words that froze him completely. "I need a husband," she declared quietly, "and you need a strong daughter." Time seemed to stop. Evan stared at her, unsure if he heard correctly. Mara's expression did not change. She was not joking. She stood tall, steady, sincere, just as she had been from the moment he met her. Evan felt his breath catch. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Mara softened her voice. "I'm not asking you to decide today. I'm just telling you the truth. I see the kind of man you are: hardworking, respectful, and patient." Lena smiled. "Because of you today. That hasn't happened in a long time." Evan looked down at Lena, who was quietly drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. Her shoulders were more relaxed, and her face was calmer than before. She glanced up at him, and for the first time, she gave him a small, shy smile. It was so gentle, so rare, that Evan felt his heart move. Mara stepped a little closer, her voice warm but firm. "Think about it. A partnership between us would mean a home for you, safety and support for my daughter, and a future where none of us face life alone." Evan felt overwhelmed. He stumbled for words. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Mara replied kindly. "Just don't disappear without thinking." Evan nodded slowly, still unable to fully absorb the moment. This woman, strong and sure of herself, had offered him something he never expected: hope, companionship, and purpose. Before he left, Lena tugged gently at his sleeve. Evan crouched down, so their eyes were level. She whispered, "Come, again." Her small voice carried more weight than anything else he had heard that day. Evan rode home with his mind spinning and his heart full of confusion, fear, and something warm he dared not name yet. Mara stood at her doorway watching him ride away, hoping she had not scared him. And Lena watched too, silently wishing the cowboy would return. Little did any of them know, this simple visit had already changed the path of their lives in a way none of them could turn away from. Evan could not sleep the night after returning from Mara's home. He lay on his small, creaking bed, staring at the ceiling while the wind pressed against the walls of his ranch house. Mara's words kept echoing in his mind again and again. "I need a husband, and you need a strong daughter." He had never heard anything like that in his life. No woman had ever spoken to him with such bold honesty, and no one had ever looked at him the way Mara did, like he was someone who mattered, someone who could build a future. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. His pride told him he should stand on his own 2 feet and fix his ranch alone, but his heart whispered something very different, something he had not allowed himself to feel for a long time. Loneliness. Deep, cold loneliness. He had lived alone for years. No partner to share a meal with. No small footsteps running across the floor. No gentle voice asking how his day went. Nothing but the sound of wind and horses and his own tired thoughts. Mara had seen this in him quickly, maybe too quickly, and Lena, the quiet little girl who barely spoke to strangers, had held onto his sleeve and whispered, "Come again." That small voice had settled inside his heart. Soft, but powerful. For 3 days, Evan avoided going anywhere near the mountain path. He convinced himself that he needed time. He worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing his fences and repairing the barn. But his thoughts were not on the ranch. They were with Mara and her daughter. Every time he stopped to drink water, he imagined Lena's shy smile. Every time the wind moved through the trees, he imagined Mara's calm voice. That mix of hope and fear followed him everywhere he went. One afternoon, while repairing a broken gate, he hit his thumb with a hammer. The pain shot through him, but what bothered him more was the wave of frustration that followed. He sat on the ground, dropped the hammer, and put his face in his hands. He felt tired, not from the work, but from the empty life he was returning to every night. He finally admitted the truth to himself. He did not want to be alone anymore. He needed someone. He needed purpose beyond survival. He needed laughter in the house, footsteps on the floor, voices at the table. He needed family, and Mara, she was offering him something real, not out of charity, but out of mutual respect. That evening, Evan cleaned himself quickly, saddled his horse, and rode toward the mountains. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of pine. As he climbed the rocky paths, his heart beat faster, not out of fear of danger, but out of fear of what he was going to say. He wasn't sure how to explain himself. He wasn't sure Mara would even want to hear his thoughts after he stayed away for days. When he reached Mara's land, he saw her splitting wood near the barn. She lifted each piece with practiced strength, her movements smooth and confident. She looked powerful, steady, and completely in control. Mara heard his horse's steps and turned. Her expression softened immediately, though she tried not to show too much emotion. She placed the axe down and brushed her hair back from her face. "Evan," she said quietly. "You came." Her voice carried a mix of relief and worry. She had been wondering whether he would disappear from her life after her bold proposal. "I needed to think," Evan said honestly. "I understand," she replied. "I know I spoke too boldly that day. I didn't mean to pressure you." Evan shook his head. "You didn't pressure me. You just surprised me." Mara nodded slowly. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him with careful eyes. "Would you like to stay for supper?" Evan swallowed hard. If that's all right." "It's more than all right," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. Before they walked toward the house, Evan heard the sound of small footsteps. Lena ran out from behind the doorway, her little boots tapping against the wooden porch. When she saw Evan, her face lit up in a way that shocked both him and Mara. She didn't hide behind her mother this time. Instead, she ran straight to him and wrapped her small arms around his leg. Evan froze, touched deeply by her gesture. He knelt down and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Hello again, Lena." The girl looked up at him with bright eyes filled with trust. Mara watched the moment unfold, her heart tightening. She had not seen her daughter this open since before her husband passed. That simple hug showed more truth than any words could express. They went inside, and Evan helped Mara prepare supper. They worked together easily, passing plates, cutting vegetables, and warming bread. Evan noticed how natural it felt, as if they had done this 100 times before. Mara moved with grace, and every so often, she glanced at him with quiet appreciation. During supper, Lena sat beside Evan and listened to him talk about his horses. Her eyes sparkled with interest. She even asked a few small questions, her voice still soft but clearer than before. Mara watched the two of them, her expression thoughtful and full of something warm. After the meal, a storm suddenly shook the mountain sky. Thunder rolled, and strong winds whistled through the trees. Mara stood up quickly to close the windows, and Evan helped her secure the shutters. Lena grew frightened by the thunder and ran to Evan, clinging to him tightly. He picked her up gently, instinctively protecting her. Mara saw the way Lena rested her head on Evan's shoulder, her tiny hands gripping his shirt. Something inside Mara settled. She knew she had made the right decision, reaching out to him. When the storm grew stronger, they gathered near the fireplace, waiting for the wind to calm. Evan sat on a wooden bench, holding Lena until she felt safe enough to lean against him without trembling. Mara sat across from him, watching silently. The firelight cast a warm glow across the room, making the moment feel peaceful despite the storm outside. After a long silence, Evan spoke softly. Mara looked at him steadily. "Why do you think that?" "Why? To think." Evan hesitated. "I'm afraid I won't be good enough. I'm afraid I'll fail. I'm afraid I won't know how to be a father or a husband. I don't have much to offer." Mara shook her head gently. "You offer more than you realize. Kindness, patience, honesty. Strength that comes from the heart, not just the hands. That is what makes a good father. And that is what makes a good husband." Evan looked down at Lena, who was holding on to him as if he belonged there. Her small trust meant everything. "I just don't want to disappoint you." "You won't," Mara said firmly. "I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for a partner. Someone who will stand with me. Someone my daughter can trust. Someone who can help build a life of peace and stability." Evan felt something shift inside him, something heavy lifting, something warm growing. He placed his hand over Lena's gently, feeling her tiny fingers curl around his thumb. "But I don't want to make a promise unless I'm sure," he said quietly. "And I don't want you to," Mara replied. "All I ask is that you consider the future carefully and honestly." The storm continued to rumble outside, but inside the house, everything felt strangely calm. Evan stayed until the winds softened. When he finally stood to leave, Lena grabbed his sleeve again, not wanting him to go. He smiled and promised her he would come back. Mara walked him to the door. Before he rode off, she said softly, "Whatever your decision is, Evan, I will respect it." Evan nodded. "I just need a little more time." Mara's eyes held a quiet hope. "Take the time you need." As Evan rode down the mountain path, the night sky cleared, revealing stars above. His heart felt heavy with fear, but also full of something bright and gentle. Something like hope. He knew his life was changing, whether he chose it or not. And deep inside, he sensed he was riding not away from Mara and Lena, but toward what might become his true home. Evan woke up early the next morning with a feeling he could not ignore anymore. The sky outside his window was pale and soft, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of earth and grass. He lay on his bed for several minutes, staring at the wooden ceiling, listening to the quiet of his lonely ranch. Every sound reminded him of the same thing. There was no one else here. No footsteps. No voices. No laughter. Nothing but the same silence he had lived with for years. For the first time, that silence felt heavier than ever. He sat up and rubbed his face, realizing how tired he felt, not tired from work, but tired from fighting life alone. Tired from pretending he did not need anyone. Tired from carrying burdens he was never meant to carry by himself. The memory of Lena clinging to him during the storm played again in his mind, soft and warm. And Mara's voice, calm, steady, full of trust, echoed in his chest. He did not need to think anymore. The answer was already inside him. He wanted a family. He wanted a home with voices and warmth. He wanted Mara's strength beside him and Lena's gentle trust in his arms. He wanted a future that was more than survival. He wanted a life that felt whole. With a deep breath, he stood up, washed quickly, and prepared his horse. He did not rush, but his hands moved with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As he tightened the saddle straps and brushed the horse's mane, he felt something inside him settle. This time, he was not riding with confusion or fear. He was riding with certainty. The sun rose as he left his ranch, turning the fields golden. Birds flew from tree to tree, singing as if welcoming a new beginning. Evan breathed deeply, feeling something open inside his heart. He rode toward the mountains, and the long journey felt lighter than ever before. When he reached the mountain path, the air felt cooler and clearer. The trees stood tall around him, and the sound of the stream guided his way. He kept thinking about Mara's face when he would tell her. Would she smile? Would she stay calm as always? Would she be relieved? He hoped so. But more than anything, he hoped Lena would feel safe and happy. At last, he reached Mara's land. He saw her outside, feeding the chickens. Her tall figure moved with an ease that always impressed him. She turned when she heard his horse, and her eyes widened slightly. She did not smile immediately, as if she was unsure why he had come. But she wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward him, steady and calm. "You came back," she said quietly. Evan climbed off his horse. He felt nervous now that she was in front of him. "I needed to talk to you," he said. Mara nodded, her expression gentle. I'm listening. Before Evan could continue, the door of the house opened slightly, and Lena peeked out. When she saw him, her face brightened, and she stepped outside. Without hesitation, she ran to him. Evan knelt down, and Lena threw her arms around him again, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might leave. That moment cleared every doubt he had ever felt. He stood up slowly, holding Lena's small hand, and faced Mara. His voice was steady when he finally spoke. I thought a lot about what you said. And I know now. I don't want to walk through life alone anymore. I want family. I want purpose. I want something more than just surviving every day. Mara's eyes softened with a quiet hope, but she said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Evan took another breath. If you still want what you asked before, if you still believe we can build a life together, then yes, I want that. I want to marry you. And I want to be a father to Lena. For a moment, everything fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mara stared at him, her eyes filling slowly with emotion she usually kept hidden. She stepped forward, her hands trembling just slightly. She placed her hands gently over Evan's shoulders, looking straight into his eyes. You're sure? She asked softly. This is a choice that shapes all our lives. Evan nodded firmly. I've never been more sure. Mara closed her eyes briefly, letting relief wash over her. When she opened them again, a smile formed slow, genuine, full of warmth. She placed one hand over Evan's heart in a quiet gesture of acceptance. Then welcome home, she whispered. Lena squeezed his hand tightly, as if claiming him without words. Evan picked her up, and she rested her head against his shoulder, completely peaceful. Mara touched her daughter's hair gently, feeling a happiness she thought she would never feel again. News of their engagement spread through the mountain settlements and nearby towns within days. People were surprised the tall, strong widow marrying the quiet cowboy from the lowlands. Some whispered that it was an unusual match. Others smiled kindly, seeing how natural they looked together. A small ceremony was arranged on Mara's land. It was simple, but beautiful. Neighbors gathered with bread, flowers, and warm wishes. Evan cleaned himself carefully and wore his best shirt, though it was still a little worn. Mara wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but she looked radiant, tall and strong like a woman who had walked through storms and survived them. Lena stood between them, holding their hands as if she was the one binding the family together. The elder who performed the marriage spoke with gentle words about unity, trust, and shared burdens. Evan listened with a heart full of emotion. When Mara looked at him, her eyes held a soft gratitude, as if she knew exactly what this meant to both of them. When the ceremony ended, Mara placed her hand in Evan's. Her fingers were warm and firm. Lena hugged his waist tightly, claiming him as her father, in her quiet, gentle way. After everyone left and the sun began to set, the new family stood together outside the house, watching the golden sky. Mara leaned slightly toward Evan, not for support, but as a partner standing beside him. For the first time in years, Evan felt whole. Over the next weeks, their lives blended together naturally. Evan moved into Mara's home, bringing only the belongings he truly needed. He slept better, laughed more, and felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. He helped Mara with the heavy tasks, repaired broken boards, managed the horses, and played with Lena every evening. The little girl trusted him completely and began speaking more, smiling more, and acting like a child who finally felt safe again. Together, they repaired what needed fixing and built what needed building. They planted new vegetables, cleaned the barn, and restored parts of the house. Mara supported Evan's ideas, and Evan respected Mara's knowledge of the land. They made every decision together, slowly becoming not just husband and wife, but a true team. Months passed, and their home became a place of peace, laughter, and shared strength. Evan would often look at Mara while she worked, admiring her strength, not just in her muscles but in her heart. And Mara would often glance at Evan with quiet gratitude, knowing she had found not just a husband, but a partner who understood the meaning of loyalty and tenderness. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Lena sat between them on the porch. She leaned her head on Evan's arm and whispered, "I'm happy." Mara looked at Evan. Evan looked at Mara. And in that moment, they both knew that every choice, every fear, every step that led them here had been worth it. A giant widow found a kind husband. A lonely cowboy found a loving family. And a small girl found two hearts to call home. Their lives, once separate and filled with struggle, had come together to form a new beginning, one built on trust, courage, and love, strong enough to last a lifetime.